My wife said she needed freedom and filed for divorce, confident the court would favor her. I quietly presented the prenup she once mocked, secured my business assets, and closed joint accounts legally. She looked shocked when the judge enforced every clause without exception. I filed the papers this morning. She said it like she was telling me the grocery store had run out of milk. Not standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed. Not crying. Not trembling. Just standing there in her silk robe, coffee mug in hand, like she'd already moved on before the words even left her mouth. I set down my fork. Not dramatically. Not slowly for effect. I just set it down because my hands suddenly didn't know what else to do. You filed for divorce, I repeated. Not a question. A confirmation. She nodded once. The way you nod when someone finally understands something you've been trying to explain for a long time. I need freedom, she said. I've needed it for a while. She sipped her coffee. I stared at the eggs I'd made for both of us. Her plate still untouched, and something in my chest went completely, terrifyingly quiet. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. I'm 38 years old. I've been married to Claire for 9 years. We met when I was building my second company from a rented office above a dry cleaning shop, and she thought that was the most romantic thing she'd ever heard. 9 years. And she filed without even telling me she was unhappy. The thing people don't tell you about hearing the word divorce from someone you love is that it doesn't arrive like a bomb. It arrives like a slow leak, like a tire going flat at highway speed. You don't realize what's happening until suddenly the car is pulling hard to one side, and you're gripping the wheel trying to figure out when exactly you lost control. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I looked at her standing in that doorway, and I thought, she's already rehearsed this conversation 100 times without me. She's had it with her friends. She's had it with her therapist. She's had it with whoever she's been talking to on her phone at midnight when she thought I was asleep. And now she was having it with me, the last person to find out. When did you decide this? I asked. She shrugged. Actually shrugged. It's been building, she said. You know it has. I didn't know. That was the honest answer. I had sensed distance, the way you sense a cold front rolling in, that pressure change before the storm, but I had chalked it up to stress, to the natural rhythm of a long marriage, to the way love sometimes goes quiet for stretches before coming back. I had been wrong. She left the kitchen. I stayed at the table. I sat there for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the microwave the entire time, like the numbers were keeping me anchored to something real. Then I called my lawyer. His name is Mr. Harmon. He's been my attorney for 11 years, since my first company, since before Claire, since before any of this. He picked up on the second ring. Tell me everything, he said, after I gave him the short version. So I did. Here's what Claire didn't know about me, or more accurately, here's what she'd chosen to forget. When we got engaged, I had already built one successful company and sold it. I was halfway through building the second. I had assets, real ones, properties, equity stakes, intellectual property tied to technology I developed, a stake in a logistics firm that had tripled in value since I'd joined the board. My mother, a sharp, unsentimental woman who'd watched her own parents lose everything in a bad divorce, had pulled me aside 3 weeks before the wedding and said, "Get a prenuptial agreement." I'd been nervous to bring it up with Claire. I remember the conversation like it was last Tuesday. We were sitting on the balcony of the apartment we'd just started sharing, the city spread out below us, and I'd handed her the folder with the draft agreement and explained, carefully, gently, trying not to make it feel like an accusation, that I thought it was the responsible thing to do. She had laughed. Not a small laugh. A full, head-thrown-back laugh. "This is the most unromantic thing I've ever been handed," she said. She flipped through 3 pages. "You actually had someone draft this?" "My lawyer," I said. She set it down and reached across the table and took my hand. "Baby," she said, "I'm not marrying you for your money." "I know," I said. "Then why do we need this?" I tried to explain. She kept shaking her head, smiling, like I was a child worried about monsters under the bed. But I held firm. Mr. Harmon had advised me that this wasn't about trust. It was about clarity. It was about protecting what I had built before we became we, so that if anything ever happened, neither of us would be left in a courtroom tearing apart something that had taken years to construct. Claire signed it. She signed it with a little eye roll, a kiss on my cheek, and the comment, "You and your lawyer are going to feel very silly about this someday." She had said that. Those exact words. I had thought about them, briefly, and then filed the document away in the back of my mind where important but hopefully unnecessary things live. I had not thought about the prenup in years. Until that morning. Until she stood in the kitchen doorway and told me she'd filed. And the moment she said the word freedom, something about that document surfaced in my mind like a buoy that had been pushed underwater and finally let go. Mr. Harmon was quiet for a long moment after I finished talking. The prenup is still valid, he said. I know, I said. She may not remember the specifics. I know, I said. Then let me ask you something, he said. How do you want to handle this? I thought about it. I thought about Claire's face that morning. The calm, the confidence, the way she had already decided how this story was going to go. I thought about the eye roll when she signed. I thought about 9 years of building something together while also never stopping building something alone. Quietly, I said, I want to handle it quietly. She said Claire's been talking to a divorce attorney for 3 months. I absorbed that. 3 months. She'd been building a legal case against our marriage for 3 months while still coming home every night, still eating dinners across from me, still asking me to zip up her dresses before events. Did Gwen know? I asked. Yeah, he said, and I could hear how uncomfortable it made him to say it. She knew. I didn't say anything. Listen, Derek said. You need to make sure you're protected. I know, I said. The prenup. I know, I said. There was a pause. Does she know you know? He asked. Know what? That she's been planning this for 3 months. I looked out through the windshield at the gray afternoon sky. Not yet, I said. Mr. Harmon had already begun pulling together the documentation before I'd even arrived at his office. He had the prenup on his desk, the original, notarized, fully executed agreement from 9 years ago, signed by both of us, witnessed, ironclad. He walked me through every clause. The business assets I had brought into the marriage, all protected. The intellectual property registered under my name before the wedding, protected. The equity in the logistics company, protected. The investment portfolio I'd built up prior to the marriage, protected. The only genuinely shared assets were the house we'd bought together 4 years in, a joint savings account, and 2 vehicles. She likely expects a 50-50 split of everything, Mr. Harmon said. That's what most people assume, I said. The prenup changes the math significantly, he said. He leaned back in his chair. The question is whether her attorney has seen it yet. Can we find out? We'll know soon enough, he said. When we file our response and attach the prenup as an exhibit, the tone of the conversation is going to change. I nodded. Do it quietly, I said again. He smiled. Just barely. Already in motion. The next 2 weeks were among... Next Tuesday, he said. 10 in the morning. I didn't tell Claire about the meeting. I didn't need to. She'd know through her attorney. But I did notice a change in her over the weekend before Tuesday. She was quieter. She'd been confident before. That particular brand of confidence that comes from having convinced yourself the outcome is already settled, already written, just waiting to be formalized. That confidence had shifted, not collapsed, just shifted. Saturday evening, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, a half-eaten plate of food pushed aside, her reading glasses on, scrolling through something. She looked up when I walked in. For a moment, just a moment, something flickered across her face that I hadn't seen in a very long time. Uncertainty. Real uncertainty. She closed the laptop before I could see what she was reading. Did you want the last of the pasta? I asked. No, she said. Go ahead. I got a fork. I leaned against the counter. You okay? I asked. She looked at me. Fine, she said. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in weeks. Tuesday morning. Mr. Harmon's conference room. Pale wood table, large windows. The hum of the city 20 stories below. Claire came in with Mr. Voss. She was dressed carefully, well-cut blazer, the kind of put-together that takes deliberate effort to look effortless. I was in a gray suit. We did not greet each other. Not coldly, just professionally, the way the situation demanded. We were no longer husband and wife in this room. We were 2 parties in a legal proceeding. Mr. Voss opened by acknowledging the prenuptial agreement. Our client was aware of the agreement at the time of signing, he said. However, we believe there are grounds to revisit certain clauses in light of the length of the marriage, the contributions made by Mrs. The agreement was signed with full disclosure, Mr. Harmon said. Calmly, not cutting him off, just redirecting. Both parties had independent legal counsel present. We're aware of that, Voss said. We're simply raising the question of. There's no question of enforceability, Mr. Harmon said. Still calm. Still even. The clause structure is compliant with state law on every point. Mr. Voss glanced at Claire. She was looking at the table, not down in defeat. More like she was running calculations behind her eyes, reconfiguring the plan. Our client also had significant input into business decisions during the marriage, Voss continued. She provided support that contributed to the growth of. We can address the specifics, Mr. Harmon said. The prenup accounts for post-marriage appreciation of business assets where direct spousal contribution can be demonstrated. He slid a document across the table. We've done a full accounting. Voss took it. He spent a long moment reviewing it. Claire did not reach for it. She was still looking at the table. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, the picture was clear. The prenup held. The business assets I had built before our marriage were protected. The equity stake, the intellectual property, the original investment portfolio, all of it, firmly in my column. The house we'd bought together would be split based on our respective contributions to the purchase, which were documented. The joint savings account would be divided. The vehicles, one each. It was not the catastrophic split Claire had apparently envisioned. It was not the version where she walked away with half of everything I had built over 15 years. It was a fair division of what we had genuinely built together, and nothing more. Outside the building, I stood by the car waiting for Mr. Harmon to finish a call. Claire came out behind me. She stopped a few feet away. We were alone for the first time since this all started. Really alone, without lawyers or paralegal assistance or the careful formality of conference rooms. She looked at me. You've had this planned, she said. Not angry, just flat. Almost impressed, in a strange, distant way. No, I said. I had a prenup that I signed 9 years ago. You knew exactly what it covered. I knew what I'd built before we got married, I said. And I made sure it was protected. She was quiet. The wind moved between us. I thought. She started, then stopped. You thought what? I asked. She shook her head. Nothing, she said. She walked to her car. I watched her go, and I thought. She thought the prenup was a joke. She thought that 9 years of marriage would override a document she'd signed with a laugh and a dismissal. She thought the judge would look at the length of the marriage, the lifestyle, the surface of things, and would hand her the version of this story she had written. She hadn't taken it seriously. Not once. Not in 9 years. Let me go back, because I think it matters. The backstory, the actual one, not the version I told myself for the first few years of the marriage, not the romantic version, is more complicated than she didn't love me or she married me for money. Neither of those things is cleanly true. Claire had loved me. I believe that. I believe she had loved me with real, genuine heat in the early years, the kind of love that's loud and certain and fills every room you're standing in. But somewhere along the way, the love had changed shape. It had become comfort. Then it had become assumption. Then it had become entitlement. And I don't think she noticed the progression. I think she woke up one day, 9 years in, and looked at the life around her, the house, the accounts, the dinner parties, the trips, and felt constrained. Not by anything I had done, not by any particular cruelty or failure on my part, just by the fact that it was a life we had built together, which meant it was also a life that bore the shape of my choices, my preferences, my presence. And she had decided she wanted a life that bore only the shape of hers. I had sensed it without naming it. I had watched her grow closer to a particular group of friends, people who talked endlessly about living your truth and releasing what no longer serves you, and other phrases that sound like wisdom until you realize they're being used to justify the simple act of quitting. Her friend Natalie was the nucleus of this group. I had never liked Natalie, not for any dramatic reason, just a quiet, sustained unease. The way you feel around someone who smiles very warmly at you while doing something cold with their eyes. Natalie had divorced her own husband 2 years before Claire filed. She had spoken about it the way people speak about completing a half marathon, with that particular mix of exhaustion and pride. I took my life back, she'd said over dinner at our house, and the table had applauded, and Claire had applauded, and I had refilled everyone's wine. I had not thought anything of it at the time. I should have. 3 weeks after the preliminary meeting, Mr. Harmon called. Voss is proposing a settlement, he said, based on the prenup's parameters. Is it reasonable? It's within range, he said. The house split is fair based on the contribution documentation. What about the joint account? 50-50 as expected. I exhaled. Send it to me, I said. I reviewed it that evening at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd stood that morning with her coffee mug and dropped the word freedom like it was weightless. The settlement was straightforward. The prenup had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had drawn a clear, clean line between what was mine before us and what was ours during us. And ours turned out to be a smaller portion than Claire had assumed. She came home that night to find me at the table. She stopped in the doorway, the same doorway where this had all started. "Did you get the settlement terms?" she asked. "I did," I said. She came in and sat down across from me. Not hostile, not performatively calm, the way she'd been in the beginning. Just tired, real tired, the kind that has nothing to do with sleep. "I want to understand something," she said. I waited. "The prenup," she said. "You never brought it up." "You never asked," I said. "After 9 years, you'd think." "What would I think?" I asked. Not sharply, genuinely. "What exactly should I have thought, Claire?" She didn't answer right away. "That maybe it wouldn't matter anymore," she said finally. "That after all this time, you wouldn't use it." I looked at her. "I'm not using it," I said. "It's simply what it is." "That feels like a technicality." "It isn't," I said. "A prenup isn't a weapon. It's a document. It says what it says. It protected what I built before we were married. You signed it knowing exactly what it covered." She looked down. "I didn't think it would ever actually come up," she said. "I know," I said. "That's the only part of this that genuinely surprises me. Let me tell you about the joint accounts, because that's another piece of this that had its own separate process, running quietly alongside the legal proceedings. Shortly after meeting with Mr. Harmon the first time, he had advised me on the steps I was legally entitled to take to protect my interests pending the divorce. Among them, protecting the joint savings account from any unilateral depletion. I did not drain the account. I did not take anything that wasn't mine. What I did was formalize the split of it, working through the proper legal channels to freeze the ability of either party to make large withdrawals without a court order. This was standard procedure in high-asset divorces. It was exactly what Mr. Harmon had recommended. But Claire had apparently not expected it. She had gone to the bank. I found out later from a brief, pained call with Derek, expecting to make a withdrawal, and found the account restricted. She had called Mr. Voss immediately. Mr. Voss had explained what had happened. She had, according to Derek, been furious. Not just annoyed, genuinely, sharply furious. Because she had a plan. She had assumed that she would file, that the proceedings would take some time, and that during that time the finances would remain as they were, accessible. She had apparently intended to move a significant portion of the joint savings before the settlement was finalized. She had not anticipated that I would act first, or that acting first was something I was even capable of. I don't say this to make her sound villainous. I've thought about it a lot since then. I think she had constructed a version of me in her mind over the years, a version that was competent at business, yes, but that was also ultimately passive when it came to her, accommodating in the way that long-married partners often are, shaped by years of choosing peace over confrontation. She had not been wrong about that version of me. He existed. He had existed for 9 years. He was the one who had let things slide, who had refilled the wine and smiled at Natalie's speeches about freedom, who had sensed the cold front and chosen to wait for the storm to pass rather than batten down the hatches. But here's the thing about that version of me. He had also, 9 years ago, sat down with a lawyer and said, "Protect what I've built." That version of me had not disappeared. He had just been very, very quiet. The court date was set for a morning in early spring. I wore the same gray suit. Mr. Harmon had a full file. The prenup, the financial disclosures from the time of signing, the certified documentation of every asset and its origin, the accounting of shared contributions versus pre-marriage holdings. Everything. Organized, numbered, tabbed, ready. We arrived first. Claire arrived with Natalie. I don't know what Natalie was doing there. She wasn't a party to anything, just moral support, I suppose, or perhaps an audience. She looked at me when they came in and gave me that particular smile, the one I'd never been able to decode. I looked away. Judge Calloway was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and reading glasses she wore on a chain around her neck. She had the kind of presence that makes you sit up straighter without being told to. She reviewed the case documents for 7 minutes in silence. 7 minutes is a very long time when you are sitting in a courtroom waiting. Then she looked up. "The prenuptial agreement," she said, "has both parties' signatures, notarization, and independent counsel confirmation." She looked at Voss. "Does your client contest the validity of the document?" Voss had tried. In the weeks leading up to the hearing, he had filed a motion arguing that the length of the marriage, combined with the significant lifestyle adjustment Claire would experience as a result of the prenup's enforcement, constituted grounds for the court to set it aside on equitable grounds. It was a Hail Mary. Mr. Harmon had filed a comprehensive response. Judge Calloway had read it. The motion to set aside the prenuptial agreement, she said, is denied. She said it the way you'd state a weather fact. Plainly, without drama. The agreement was entered into voluntarily, with full financial disclosure, with independent legal counsel for both parties. She set down the page she was holding. The court will enforce the agreement as written. I heard Claire exhale. Not a sob, just a slow, quiet exhalation. The sound of a held breath finally released. The sound of a story ending differently than she had written it. The rest of the hearing was procedural. The House split, calculated per the documented contributions. The joint savings, divided 50-50. The vehicles, one each. The business assets, mine, as specified in the agreement. The equity stake, mine. The IP, mine. Judge Calloway read through each item with the same flat efficiency. Does either party have objection to the settlement terms as presented? Voss said something quiet to Claire. She shook her head. No objection, Voss said. No objection, Mr. Harmon confirmed. Then we're adjourned, the judge said. She gathered her papers. She left the room. And that was it. Outside the courthouse, the spring air was brisk and had that particular clarity that only comes after long gray winters. I stood on the steps and loosened my tie and thought, it's over. Not with triumph. Not with grief. Just with the strange, flat finality of something that had been decided. Mr. Harmon shook my hand. Clean, he said. Just like 9 years ago. I almost laughed. Claire found me on the steps. Natalie had gone to get the car. We stood about 4 feet apart, which is somehow both very close and very far when the person you're standing near used to be your closest person in the world. She looked at me, and this time, the expression was different from all the other times in the past few months. There was no calculation, no strategy, no confidence, performed or real. Just her, just Claire, 41 years old, standing on courthouse steps in a well-cut blazer, looking at the man she'd decided to leave. You really held on to that thing, she said. It was a legal document, I said. I didn't need to hold on to it. It just existed. She nodded slowly. I said you'd feel silly about it someday, she said. I remembered. You did, I said. A pause. I was wrong, she said. I looked at her. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a request. It was just an acknowledgement. The first honest one she'd offered in a very long time. You were planning this for 3 months, I said. She blinked. I know, she said. I'm sorry for that. Why? I asked. Not why are you sorry. Why did you do it that way? She was quiet for a moment. Because I was afraid, she said. If I told you, you'd have talked me out of it. Or I'd have talked myself out of it. And I didn't want to come back from the edge this time. This time, I said. She looked away. There were other times you came to the edge? She didn't answer. I absorbed that. All those stretches of distance I'd chalked up to stress. All those cold fronts I'd waited out. She'd been standing at the edge for years. I had never known. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, she said. Not just about the filing. About all of it. I believed her. And I also understood, standing there on those steps, that the sorry was real and also completely beside the point. Because the marriage was over. Not because a judge had just said so. It had been over, in the quiet, invisible way that things end before their official ending, for a long time. I went home to the house that was mine for the next 60 days, until we finalized the property transition. I sat in the kitchen where she had stood in the doorway. I thought about 9 years. Not cataloging them, not scoring them, not building a case for or against. Just feeling the weight of them. 9 years is not a small thing, even when it ends. Especially when it ends. I thought about the prenup. About the way she'd laugh when I handed it to her. About my mother saying, protect what you've built. I had not signed that document out of distrust. I had signed it because I believed, I still believe, that clarity is a form of respect. That knowing exactly where you stand is better than assuming. That a document which says, here is what is mine, here is what is ours, here is what happens if this doesn't work, is not a hedge against love. It's a form of honesty. She had seen it as a lack of faith. I had seen it as a different kind of faith. Faith that even if everything fell apart, we would each walk away with what was truly ours. And that's exactly what happened. Derek came by that evening with 2 beers and the good sense not to say much. We sat on the back porch, and he let the silence be what it was. After a while he said, how are you doing? Not a question, really. Just an opening. I don't know yet, I said. He nodded. You held it together, he said. The whole time. I didn't have a choice, I said. Everyone has a choice, he said. He was right. I thought about that. I had chosen not to beg. I had chosen not to fight in the ugly, destructive way that divorce can become. I had chosen to protect myself through the quiet, legal, documented means available to me. And the result was clean. As clean as a 9-year marriage can be when it ends. Natalie posted something on her social media a week later. I didn't see it myself. Derek's wife Gwen mentioned it, a little grimly, in that way she had when she knew she was delivering difficult information. It was something about women standing up for themselves and the system failing those who deserve better. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Judge Calloway had responded in the only way that mattered in that courtroom. I want to tell you something about the business. The second company, the one I was building when I met Claire, the one I'd been running for 11 years now, had grown significantly over the course of our marriage. Claire had contributed to that growth in ways that were real, if indirect. She had hosted dinners that became deals. She had been a partner in the social architecture that makes certain kinds of business possible. I have never pretended otherwise. The prenup acknowledged that in its own way. The clause about post-marriage appreciation with demonstrable spousal contribution had been specifically included for that reason. We had calculated her share of the post-marriage appreciation fairly. It was in the settlement. She had received it. Because fair means fair. It doesn't mean all. And it doesn't mean whatever you assume. It means what was agreed to, what was documented, what was built together versus what was built alone. That's all. That's everything. I sold the house in the early summer. Not because I had to. It was mine to keep based on the settlement. But because it was the house where she had stood in that doorway. And I found I didn't want to live inside that image every morning. I bought a smaller place. Top floor of a building downtown, 2 bedrooms, a balcony that looks out over the city. It reminded me, a little, of the apartment I'd had when I was building the second company. Before any of this. The beginning of something. Mr. Harmon called me in September just to check in. He does that sometimes. It's one of the things I appreciate about him. He treats clients like people, not files. How are you? He asked. Better, I said. Genuinely. Good, he said. Then, in 22 years of practice, I've never had a prenup challenged and upheld more cleanly than yours. It was written well, I said. It was also never contested during the marriage, he said. A lot of people renegotiate over time. Or one party pressures the other to modify it. Never happened with you. She never asked, I said. If she had, I thought about it. I would have had the same conversation, I said. The same one as the balcony, 9 years earlier. And she would have signed it again? I think so, I said. With the same eye roll. He chuckled. A prenup no one takes seriously is the best kind, he said. It means no one tried to game it. Here's what I know now that I didn't know in that kitchen, the morning she stood in the doorway. I know that protection and love are not opposites. I know that the most romantic thing you can do for someone, in many ways, is be honest about what is yours and what is theirs and what belongs to the space between you. I know that confidence can be a costume. That Claire walked into that divorce certain the court would see things her way, not because she had done the legal work, but because she believed, deep in the same part of her that had laughed at the prenup, that outcomes bent toward her. They didn't. And I know that I spent 9 years softening myself in ways I hadn't noticed, getting rounder at the edges, choosing peace. And I don't regret all of it. Most of a marriage is exactly that kind of accommodation, the quiet, daily choosing of the other person's comfort over your own preference. That's not weakness. That's love. But there is a version of that softening that goes too far. That starts to look, from the outside, and maybe from the inside too, like permission. Like, you can do whatever you want of this. It will hold. I will hold. I am the thing that holds. And when you spend long enough being the thing that holds, people start to forget that you have a shape of your own. That underneath the accommodating, the quiet, the refilled wine glasses, there is a person who once sat down with a lawyer and said, "Protect what I've built." That person never went away. He just waited. I don't hate her. I want to say that clearly, near the end of this. I don't hate Claire. I don't think she is a bad person. I think she is someone who made decisions based on assumptions rather than facts, and the facts turned out to be different from the assumptions. That's not villainy. That's just a particular kind of mistake that has a particular kind of consequence. The consequence in her case was a divorce that looked nothing like she'd planned for. The consequence in mine was a divorce that was painful but survivable. More than survivable. Last thing. A few months after the settlement was finalized, I was at a work event. The kind of dinner I'd attended 100 times before with Claire beside me, but now attended alone. And I found that I didn't mind it. that I sat down at the table and talked to people and felt present, not performing presence, not monitoring how the room was responding to us as a couple, just there, just myself. And somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, I realized something. The prenup hadn't just protected my business assets. It had protected something harder to name. The version of me that had existed before us. The one who had sat in a rented office above a dry cleaning shop and built something from almost nothing. The one who had known, even in the middle of love, that knowing where you stand is not the same as being afraid. That version of me had been there the whole time, waiting quietly, patient as a clause in a signed document, ready for exactly the moment he was needed. She had said I'd feel silly about the prenup someday. Standing on those courthouse steps, she had acknowledged she was wrong. I don't feel silly. I don't feel vindicated either, exactly. I feel clear. Clear the way the air gets after a long winter. Like something has been stripped down to what it actually is. And what it actually is, it turns out, is enough. More than enough. It's exactly what I built. And it's exactly what I kept.